Hello and welcome to Business Daily, live from Seoul. I'm Han Daeun, filling in for Lee Ji-yoon this week. We have a lot in store for you today, so let's start right off with today's highlights. President Park Geun-hye is in Beijing for China's massive military parade, a sign of robust ties with a neighboring country. But some question, is it all good for the economy as well? The Korean government is pulling out all the stops to loosen people's purse strings. But critics say the key to more spending lies in much more than one-time tax benefits. But before we get to that, Korea logged a current account surplus for the 41st consecutive month in July, staying in the black for the longest period on record, while extending its so-called slow growth surplus. According to data released by the Bank of Korea on Wednesday, the current account surplus reached $10.1 billion last month. This is a drop from the record high of $12.1 billion posted in June. The decline is largely attributed to a fall in the balance of goods, which narrowed to $10.9 billion from $13.1 billion the previous month. Exports slipped over 10% on year, while imports plummeted over 20%, largely due to low oil prices and a dip in processing trade with China. Meanwhile, Korea logged another deficit in its travel account for the month of July, climbing to the highest level since 2008. Following shortfalls in May and June, the country's travel account deficit in July came to $1.45 billion from a flurry of travel cancellations stemming from the MERS outbreak. An official from the Bank of Korea noted the number of overseas tourists to Korea halved in July on year, adding the trend will likely linger for now as it takes time for travelers to draw up new plans for trips abroad. A travel account deficit means money spent by Koreans abroad exceeds the sum spent by foreigners in Korea. Despite such bleak figures, the number of tourists coming to Korea, especially from China, are slowly but surely ticking up. The MERS outbreak may have scared tens of thousands of Chinese visitors away, but local retailers say sales are starting to pick up. Our Kim Min-ji reports.
They're back. The number of Chinese visitors shopping at Korea's department and duty-free stores is back on the recovery track after being hit hard due to the recent MERS outbreak. Industry officials say Chinese tourist spending is approaching levels seen last year. Lotte Duty-Free, the country's biggest duty-free chain, says its sales during the last week of August were down only 5% from the same period a year ago. Although sales have yet to return to normal, it's looking much brighter than the peak of the MERS scare in June and July, when sales slumped by up to 50%. However, market watchers say it's going to take time for sales figures to return to levels seen early this year. During the January to May period before MERS shook Korea's economy, the growth rate of sales to Chinese tourists stood at over 50% on year on average. In what could be a turning point for Korean retailers, China's calendar is packed with holidays from the end of September. China's Mid-Autumn Festival falls on the last weekend of September, and it's followed by a week-long National Day holiday, usually the peak season for Chinese tourists flocking to Korea. And to take full advantage, the local retail industry is busy preparing events to lure big-spending Chinese visitors. Samsung Group's Shilla Hotel and Amusement Park Everland will hold a session in China to promote local tourism, while most department stores and duty-free chains will be showering tourists who spend a certain amount with gift vouchers and other freebies. Lotte Duty Free will host a concert in the southeastern port city of Busan, where roughly half of the participants are expected to be Chinese visitors. On top of this, the Seoul Family Concert has also been rescheduled to October, with more than 20,000 Chinese tourists likely to attend. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
The market capitalization of Samsung Electronics has plunged 24% compared to last year. According to Bloomberg's statistics of the world's top 100 companies, Samsung Electronics ranked 6th in market cap decline. China's e-commerce giant Alibaba came in first with a 35.2% drop, followed by Chevron and Qualcomm in the U.S. At the end of August, the market cap for Samsung Electronics stood at $135.6 billion. This is a drop from $178.8 billion recorded on the last transaction day in 2014. The Korean tech giant has been suffering losses this year due to a bleak outlook in its mobile business. And now let's check on how the markets fared here in Seoul today. While China continued to push Asian stocks lower on the back of grim manufacturing data, Seoul shares went up slightly on this Wednesday. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi was up 0.05%, finishing the day at 1915.22, while the tech-heavy Kosdaq also edged up 0.75% to end at 678.02. On the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency lost ground against the greenback, ending at 1,180.71. You may remember the Korean government last week immediately put into effect a rollback on some consumption taxes, including those in cars, furniture, and high-end handbags. This was meant to help stimulate spending, but some say it doesn't go far enough. Our Eunice Kim has more.
The slashed consumption tax is moving would-be car buyers at this dealership. The 30% cut translates to a discount of some $250 on small vehicles and $420 on their medium-sized counterparts.
We're receiving 2 to 3 times more inquiries after the consumption tax cut. People see this as the right time to buy a car.
Last Thursday, the government announced a series of tax relief measures to encourage people to spend. Effective through the end of the year, it also raised the threshold value of luxury goods that are taxed from $1,600 to $4,200.
It's meant to resuscitate spending that was suppressed due to temporary factors like the MERS outbreak.
In fact, figures show Korean households spent only 72% of their disposable income from April to June, leaving the largest ratio to date unspent. And much of that money is instead believed to be going to pay down debts, like mortgages. While there's no specific data on how much that is, taking a look at how household debt has swelled over the past months, marking a record high in the second quarter, it is likely a chunk. A more fundamental cause of the low spending trend may be fear of an insufficient social safety net. A recent study by Hyundai Research Institute indicates 1 out of 2 elderly households are making ends meet on $530 per month, highlighting the need to strengthen pensions and to create more post-retirement work. Experts warn a failure to do so could mean following in the footsteps of Japan, a country already dealing with shrinking consumer spending as its elderly population rapidly climbs. Eunice Kim, Business Daily.
Families in Korea spend big to make sure their son or daughter's wedding goes off without a hitch. This weighs heavily on many parents as they're culturally obligated to fork out tens of thousands of dollars for an expensive wedding ceremony. And a recent survey shows that the burden is much heavier for the groom's parents than the bride's. Our Son Jung-in with the story.
There is a sizable gap between the men and the women when it comes to wedding costs, well, at least for their parents. According to data from the Korean Women's Development Institute, Korean parents spent an average of over 80 million won, or roughly $68,000 when they married off their son. The average cost for daughters? Less than 60 million won, or $51,000. The Ministry of Gender Equality and Family released the data Wednesday following a survey of 1,200 parents and their adult children who tied the knot within the last 3 years. It's hard to find married couples who had a stereotypical Korean wedding ceremony without receiving any financial support from their parents. Only 10% of newlyweds said they paid for their special day entirely out of their own pocket. The survey shows that it's still a prevailing notion in Korea that it's the parents' responsibility to help pay for the wedding, especially when they have the ability to do so. That's not to say parents don't feel pressure covering the cost. Over 93% of the parents surveyed said they never expressed their stress over the wedding costs to their in-laws. Son Jung-in, Business Daily.
President Park Geun-hye has arrived in China on this Wednesday for a three-day trip to attend China's celebrations, marking the 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. As significant as her visit is considered to be on the diplomatic front, it also carries weight on the economic front. Accompanied by a record number of business figures and officials, the president hopes to strengthen economic ties between the two countries, especially at a time when Korea is feeling downward pressure from China's struggle with growth. To tell us more, our Shin Se-min now joins us with me in the studio. Good to see you.
Hi there.
So how significant is this trip? It's not her first time to the country.
As you said, she's traveling with the largest business delegation ever. In size, it's the largest compared to the previous 125 business representatives that joined her on her trip to her previous trip to South American countries in April. But there are concerns and questions about whether so much emphasis should still be put on the markets in China.
156 businessmen and representatives from over 100 small and mid-sized enterprises are looking to expand their scope of business in China as they join President Park Geun-hye on her trip to Beijing on Wednesday. It's the largest business delegation to travel with the president so far. An overwhelming 82% of businesses are SMEs, looking to further break into the Chinese market at a time when woes from the world's second largest economy have reverberated throughout the world and the Korean economy. Cell and Tech Bio, a medical equipment manufacturer, is one of the 105 companies. The firm is looking to seal a deal with a Chinese medical supplier during its visit.
The demand for technology-driven medical equipment in China is immense, as most of their work is carried out manually. Plus, it's a sector that will be least affected by the ups and downs of the economy.
China is no doubt Korea's biggest trading partner, with bilateral trade jumping over 36-fold since diplomatic ties were established 23 years ago. Just last year, China, including Hong Kong, sucked in over 30% of Korea's outbound shipments. But as President Park embarks on this trip with an extensive number of SME businessmen, concerns are growing over the potential of China's slowing economy hitting Korea's smaller exporters head-on.
Korean firms in the manufacturing sector are already struggling, meaning all businesses on the export front are suffering, but small firms will be hit even harder.
A report by Hyundai Research Institute shows just how hard the Korean economy can be hit by China. It says if China's economy expands below the 5% mark next year, Korea's export growth will fall by 4 percentage points and economic growth by 1 percentage point. Even if China's economy manages to swell by 5%, it would still hurt Korea's export growth by 2.2 percentage points and dent overall economic expansion by 0.6 of a percentage point. But experts say it's too much of a loss for Korea to shift its focus now to other developing markets away from China.
The Korean economy was able to uphold growth as the world's second largest economy prospered. Although now the Chinese market is suffering, it is better to stick with what we have and try to find a niche market within the country.
In other words, businesses should be looking at smaller, more focused sectors within China that offer opportunities of joint growth.
There are emerging sectors, for example, the movie production. So there are the parts that the Korean side can do better, and there are the places where Chinese firms must contribute. So by dividing the roles, say the division of labor clearly, the two parties, by collaborating each other, can create a really good synergy effect.
Well, it certainly looks like a lot of Korean businesses are in for the long haul, but for the time being, what should the companies do? Should they adjust their approach towards the Chinese market? Is that the most desirable thing to do for now?
Yes, while experts are saying there are still risks for smaller companies entering the Chinese market now, they say the state of China's economy shouldn't be a stumbling block for them in expanding their businesses. And as with other cases, firms need to thoroughly study the market. And an analyst that I talked to mentioned targeting the Chinese market by region is important, since development on the coastal areas have shown much better performance than other parts of the country.
So you're saying, and the experts are saying, that Korea should still keep its focus on China despite its current economic woes.
That's right. But while maintaining its relations, people say Korea should refrain from putting all eggs in one basket. And that is because experts noting that there's too much reliance on the Chinese market when there are multiple business opportunities elsewhere around, like in Africa, where economic relations are least developed.
Well, so I guess we should keep our eyes wide open to also tap into other continents for more opportunities as part of efforts to reduce the heavy reliance on China. But Seoul, for its part, has taken the first step forward to ratify its free trade agreement with Beijing.
That's right. The general consensus is to keep relation with China as is. But like you said, with the ruling party in Korea having introduced a motion to ratify the bilateral FTA, the trade pact is expected to go in effect not too long in the future, helping spike bilateral economic ties even more. And earlier this year, Korea also agreed to get on board with the Beijing-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, a move aimed at deepening relations with China.
Yes, of course, the AIIB, of course, is another huge topic we could discuss for days. So it looks like it'll be a balancing act, staying closely involved in the Chinese market, while at the same time making sure not to be too overboard.
That's right.
All right, thank you, Simon, so much for that report today.
My pleasure.
And that brings us to the end of the show. From all of us here at Arirang, thank you for watching.